So far, we've been looking at elasticity of demand. We looked at income elasticity of demand, price elasticity of demand, and also cross elasticity of demand. Now is the time to look at elasticity of supply. So, what is elasticity of supply? Well, price elasticity of supply is simply the responsiveness of quantity supplied when the price of a good changes. In other words, now we look at producer's perspective, because when the producer is finding the price of a good to go up, how is his ability to increase the quantity that he's producing? He may be easily able to increase supply given some factors, and he may not be able to sometimes increase supply. So we want to explore his flexibility or his ability to increase the quantity produced when there is a change in price. The formula for price elasticity of supply is simply PES equal to percentage change in quantity supplied over percentage change in price. Now, typically, we know this from our discussion that supply curves are upward sloping. This would mean whenever the price of a good goes up, we know this the quantity supplied will also go up. So if I draw my supply curve with price on my y-axis, quantity on my x-axis, my supply curve is upward sloping like this, right? If my supply curve is upward sloping, this would mean whenever the price goes up, quantity supplied goes up, which therefore implies that PES will always be, is always positive. And we've discussed the reason why PES is positive. Well, the first reason we talked about was simply because, when the price goes up, this is just a recap from our older discussion. When the price goes up, quantity supplied will go up because producers have an incentive to produce more because the profitability goes up if the price goes up. And the second reason we also talked about was that when you're increasing quantity, right, sometimes that it happens that your ability to increase quantity may get affected by a rise in cost. So when the quantity goes up, because there's a rise in cost taking place, you as a producer may decide to increase price in order to maintain profitability. So that could be the second reason. We call that cost motive. Now let's look at the factors that affect elasticity of supply. So what are the factors that determine price elasticity of supply? Well, the first factor that affects price elasticity of supply is how is the cost going to increase when the output is increased. In other words, increase in cost when output is increased. If total costs rise significantly as a producer attempts to increase supply, then it is very likely that a producer may be reluctant to or may not be able to raise the supply, making the good to be inelastic. In short, the cost increases matter for a producer because his profitability may depend on that. So total costs may not rise significantly if the cost of the factor of production, like inputs that you are engaging in production, do not increase quickly as a firm use more of them. So for example, if I want to increase my output and I may not need to hire more factors of production, then my cost may not rise that much. But if I need to hire more factors of production or need to undertake a significant cost, then my ability to increase supply will be low, and that will make my supply to be inelastic. So let's talk about this, guys. What are the factors that will make the supply of a good inelastic because the cost rises a lot? And the first factor is the existence of unused capacity. Whenever firms have unused capacity, that basically results in them to easily increase supply. And the reason is very simple, that you have a lot of significant productive resources. Let me write that: productive resources, like for example land or labor or capital, that is not fully employed, right? And as a result of that, whenever there is a rise in price, you will see the quantity rise, quantity supply to go up by much more, because you have the ability easily to increase supply. On the other hand, if you are producing at full capacity, 100% of your resources are employed, then it is really difficult for you to increase supply without a significant increase in productive resources, which would mean you may need to hire more labor, more capital, making it very unlikely or difficult for you to increase supply. And therefore, we will say that the higher the unused capacity, or let me write this, whenever there is unused capacity, you will see supply to be elastic. When you have full capacity, you're producing at full capacity, supply will tend to be inelastic, in some cases perfectly inelastic. Similar to this idea is the mobility of factors of production. Sometimes it happens that you may not need to hire new factors of production in your business because you might have factors of production that are already employed but they are in another productive use. So if factors of production can easily be moved, for example, one productive use to another, then we will say PES will tend to be elastic. Let me give you an example of that. For example, I teach economics, right? But let's say I can also teach accounts equally good. So if I can teach both economics and accounts with the same ability, whenever, let's say, my school is finding that there is a lot more students wanting to study accounts, they may ask me to increase my workload of teaching accounts. So this means that I can easily be moved from economics teaching to accounts teaching, and that could result in them to increase the supply of accounts classes offered to students. However, if, for example, I tell you this, that economics teachers are unable to teach accounts, which by the way typically is the case, economics teachers may not be able to teach accounts that well, trust me on that. But if that happens, then there would be what we call an inelastic supply, because the ability of a school to switch factors of production from one use to another may be limited. And therefore, if they want to increase the number of classes for accounts, all they need to do will be to hire new accounts teachers, which would mean higher salaries or higher costs, higher training needs, or sometimes even asking existing sort of teachers to work more, which means overtime pays. This will mean that the lower the flexibility you have in terms of mobility of factors of production from one use to another, the more inelastic the supply. So, just to recap, the first two factors that we discussed, the mobility of factors of production as well as the presence of spare capacity, both are the factors that are related to cost, because these will determine whether our costs will go up significantly or not whenever the output is going up. And that therefore will determine what we call firms' flexibility or firms' ability to increase supply. There are some other factors also which will result in our supply to be determined. One such factor is the perishability or non perishability of a good. So, what are perishable goods? Well, we say perishable goods are those goods that are difficult to store, and the reason why they are difficult to store is because they have a smaller shelf life. For example, agricultural goods are perishable in nature, and because they are perishable in nature, it's difficult to store or stock them for future need, which would mean their supply tends to be more inelastic. On the other hand, if you look at goods, for example, non agricultural goods like manufactured goods, one would argue this, that the manufactured goods are very elastic in supply because I can easily store them. For example, if I'm a producer of chairs, it is really easy for me to produce a lot of them and then store them, and whenever the price goes up, or whenever there is a higher demand for them, leading to the price to go up, I can easily increase supply. So when the goods are perishable, they are inelastic in nature, like agricultural item, because it's difficult to store them. On the other hand, when they are manufactured goods, they are elastic in nature, making them non-perishable. Lastly, we consider the time period as well. When we look at time period, we're looking at short run versus long run. we know this that the longer the time period, the more easy it is for firms to increase supply. Why? Because they can easily train new workers, add more capacity, even like spend money on increasing their production capacity. So in the long run, we will see supply tends to be more elastic, while in the short run, firms' ability to increase supply will not be that much, making supply to be inelastic. So, time period under consideration means the amount of time we are looking at, and therefore, we know this that the value of PAS will be very elastic in the long run because firms can alter all factors of production very easily in the long run as compared to short run.